only Boost Mobile.
Boost Mobile?
We'll give you a free year of service.
Free year?
When you buy a new 5G phone.
New 5G phone?
Enough.
But I'm your hype man. When you purchase an eligible device, you get $25 off every month for 12 months with credits totaling 1 year of free service. Taxes extra for the device and service plan. Online only.
If this back-to-school season, talking to your teenager sounds like this. With Boost Mobile, make it sound like this. Come to your Boost store, get a line, and take home a tablet for only $99.99. Perfect for staying connected and studying anywhere. They're happy, and you save. Visit your nearest Boost store. Requires ID verification. New $20 per month tablet plan and $35 device setup fee. Taxes extra.
A pale dawn breaks over the vineyards and olive groves south of Florence, deep in the Tuscan hills, 1981. Carabinieri officers stand in uneasy silence on a remote country lane. Before them is a small Fiat car, its windshield cracked by bullets. Slumped in the driver's seat is a young man who could almost be sleeping, were it not for the dark wound at his temple and the dried blood spattered on the window glass. A short distance away, amid wildflowers, at the foot of an embankment, lies the body of an 18-year-old woman, stripped and mutilated. In the cool morning air, the scene feels eerily still, with no sign of struggle, as though violence had erupted and vanished in an instant. But the gruesome mutilation speaks volumes. The killer had carved away the woman's pubic area with shocking precision, a cut so expert that investigators believe it could be the work of a surgeon or a butcher. This is a sight of pure horror. Yet it is not unique. It's part of a pattern that authorities are only just beginning to comprehend. I'm Sarah Powell, and this is Obscurata, because some stories have no ending. The Tuscan countryside has always seemed idyllic. Medieval castles on hilltops, framed by cypress trees, lovers stealing away to secluded lanes on warm summer nights. But now, on this June 1981 morning, Florence awakens to the realization that a predator stalks these hills. This double slaying of a young couple, shot dead on a moonless night, and the woman horrifically violated, bears an uncanny resemblance to another killing years earlier. It was the journalist Mario Spezzi who first connected the dots. As he rushes to report on the 1981 crime, Spezzi recalls a similar case from 1974, where another pair of young lovers were slain in their car under equally mysterious circumstances. In a sidebar to his article, Spezzi boldly suggests what people hadn't dared. A serial killer is prowling Florence's lovers' lanes. The local newspaper dubs the unknown assailant Il Mostro di Firenze, the monster of Florence. And with that name, a legend is born. By the early 1980s, fear had seeped into the fabric of Florentine life. The idea of a serial killer, a term scarcely used in Italy back then, was as foreign and terrifying as the crimes themselves. Parents forbade their teenagers from parking on country roads. Police circulated flyers urging couples to avoid having sex in cars, lest they become the monster's next prey. Young lovers who once sought privacy under the stars now felt a cold dread alongside their passion. The Tuscan night, formerly filled with the chirping of cicadas and whispers of romance, became the hunting ground of an invisible killer. He struck on dark, moonless weekends, using the cover of night to mask his approach. Each attack followed a chilling ritual. First, the lovers were shot at close range through the car windows with a .22 caliber pistol. Then, the killer would ensure their deaths with additional shots or knife thrusts. Finally came the mutilations, gruesome trophies cut from the bodies of the female victims. Spent brass casings marked with a distinctive Winchester Series H stamp were left behind at each scene. Signature calling cards from the monster's Beretta handgun. For years, these clues remained scattered and unconnected until the carnage reached critical mass and the pattern could no longer be ignored. The terror began quietly in 1968. On a warm August night that year, a 32-year-old woman named Barbara Locke slipped away with her lover, 29-year-old Antonio Lobianco, for a secret tryst in a parked car on the outskirts of Florence. In the back seat, there's Lockie's 6-year-old son, Natalino. Sometime after midnight, darkness erupted in gun flashes. Lockie and Lobianco were shot dead at point-blank range. Little Natalino awoke to a nightmare. His mother sprawled lifeless, blooded by multiple .22 caliber bullets. Terrified, the child fled into the night, eventually reaching a nearby house, pounding on the door and crying for help. The killings of Lockie and Lobianco were brutal, but in 1968, they were not seen as the work of a phantom predator. Lockie's husband, Stefano Mele, confessed to the crime amid a haze of jealousy and scandal. His wife had been notoriously promiscuous, known around town as the Queen Bee, and Stefano became the convenient culprit. He was convicted and imprisoned, and Tuscany slept soundly once more. The double murder was filed away as a tragic domestic drama, not the birth of a monster. It would be 6 years before the killer struck again. 6 years in which the Lockie case faded from memory. September the 15th, 1974, near a disco called the Teen Club in Borgo San Lorenzo. Teenage sweethearts Pasquale Gentlecore, 19, and Stefani Patini, 18, parked Pasquale's little Fiat on a quiet country lane for some privacy. What happened next seemed lifted from the pages of a horror novel. Sometime that night, an unknown assailant approached the vehicle and opened fire through the windows, killing Pasquale before he could even start the engine. The attacker then dragged Stefania from the car. In a frenzy of violence, she was stabbed 97 times. An act of overkill that left the hillside soaked with blood. But the horror did not end there. According to investigators' reports, the killer violated Stefania's lifeless body with a grapevine stalk. a detail that shocked even seasoned detectives and fueled speculation about a ritualistic or sadistic motive. It was a detail as bizarre as it was sickening, and it hinted at a warped sexual or ritualistic motive. Hours earlier, Stefania had confided to a friend that a weird man had been frightening her. She believed a stranger was stalking her in the days leading up to that night. Other young couples later reported that same Lover's Lane was frequented by voyeurs, local perverts nicknamed Indians, for how they crept in the darkness, watching lovers from the bushes. Perhaps one of those shadowy figures had graduated from peeping Tom to murderer. The 1974 Lover's Lane slayings made headlines. The savage mutilation especially shocked the conservative Catholic sensibilities of the time, but with no immediate connection to the 1968 case. Police were left grasping at straws. Investigators briefly entertained leads from black magic rituals to pornographic film ring, but nothing solid emerged. The case went cold, filed away as an isolated incident. For the rest of the 1970s, nothing similar occurred. Florence's young couples breathed a sigh of relief and returned to their moonlit rendezvous. But the reprieve was merely the calm before the storm. In June 1981, the monster returned with a vengeance. And this time, he began a relentless campaign of terror. On the night of June the 6th, 1981, 30-year-old Giovanni Fogli, a warehouseman, had driven his fiancée, 21-year-old Carmilla Dinuccio, to a familiar secluded spot near the suburb of Scandisi. What they thought was a private moment was shattered in a hail of bullets. The next morning, when their lifeless bodies were discovered, Carmella's corpse had been pulled from the car and gruesomely mutilated, the flesh of her pubic area carved away with almost surgical neatness. The sheer depravity of this act stunned the police. It echoed the cruelty inflicted on Stefania Pettini in 1974, immediately raising alarms that the same psychopath might have returned. Investigators noted another chilling detail. A local paramedic and known voyeur, Enzo Spalletti, had been lurking in the area that night and bizarrely began bragging about the murder before the police had even publicly identified the victims. Spalletti was arrested in a frenzy of desperation. Perhaps the authorities thought they'd caught the monster red-handed. Yet just 3 months later, Spalletti was unequivocally proven innocent when the monster struck again, while the keeper sat in jail. The real killer was still out there. October 23rd, 1981. In the wooded parkland near Calazzano, another engaged couple, Stefano Baldi, 26, and Susanna Cambi, 24, were found slaughtered in Stefano's car. Once more, the killer's brutal signature was on display. Susanna's pubic region had been surgically excised, just like Carmella's. As if taunting the living, an anonymous caller phoned Susanna's mother the morning after the murders, cryptically offering to talk to her about her daughter. Investigators believed it was likely the killer himself, reveling in his cruelty. In the days before her death, Susanna had told her mother she was being tormented by a stranger. even chased by a mysterious car. But those warnings only made sense in hindsight. By now, the pattern was undeniable. Someone was targeting young couples in parked cars, always on the weekends, always under cover of night, often around the phase of the new moon when the sky was darkest. The Italian press, led by Spezzi and his colleagues, sounded the alarm that a serial killer, perhaps Italy's first modern serial killer, was on the loose in Tuscany. The moniker Monster of Florence spread like wildfire, amplifying public panic. Sales of guns and door locks spiked, and the Florentine nightlife ground to a halt. Gone were the carefree evenings in the hills. The city of art and love was now a city under siege by an unseen monster. At last, law enforcement began connecting the dots that Spezzi and others in the media had started to draw. The ballistics from the 1981 shooting were matched not only to each other, but also to shell casings from the 1974 Pettini Gentlecore murder. Astonishingly, when detectives dug deeper, they realised the same gun had also been used back in the 1968 Donnell homicide of Lockie and Lobianco. It was a staggering revelation. The same .22 caliber Beretta pistol, firing the same Winchester H cartridges, had been used in all these crimes. The monster spree had actually begun years before anyone knew. This discovery in 1981-1982 blew the 1968 conviction of Stefano Mele into question. He'd been in prison during at least one of the later murders, so he clearly couldn't have been the sole culprit. Mele's original confession now looked doubtful, possibly coerced or false. In fact, under fresh interrogation, the meek Sardinian repeatedly shifted blame to various acquaintances and relatives, hinting that multiple people, perhaps his wife's lovers or their Sardinian kin, might have been involved. These inconsistencies birthed the investigation's first major theory, the Sardinian trail. Even as police scrambled to follow new leads, the monster continued to kill. June 19th, 1982, Paolo Mandari, 22, a mechanic, and his girlfriend, Antonella Miglorini, 20, became the next targets. They'd driven to a lover's spot near Montes Bertoli, but this time the outcome was slightly different. As the assailant opened fire, Paolo, perhaps having heard a twig snap or a breath in the dark, tried to speed away. In a panic, the car lurched forward and careened into a ditch. The monster approached the wreck and shot both victims at close range. But the crash and the arrival of other motorists on the road forced him to flee before he could perform his usual mutilations. When first responders arrived, they found Paolo still alive, gravely wounded but clinging to life. He died hours later at the hospital, never regaining consciousness to describe the killer. This attack was a narrow miss for the monster. It showed that even a slight disruption, a passing car, a failed engine, anything could thwart his ritual. And it provided investigators with another crucial piece of the puzzle. Evidence from this scene finally clinched the link back to 1968. Inside the case files of the old Lockie murder, an examining magistrate discovered 5 forgotten bullets and casings that had inexplicably been tucked away in a folder. Ballistic tests confirmed they matched the monster's Beretta, proving that Barbara Locke and Antonio Lobianco in 1968 were indeed the monster's first victims. This belated revelation, delivered by an anonymous tip from a friendly citizen who urged police to re-examine the 1968 case, was both vindicating and infuriating. It meant the monster had been operating for 14 years already, his trail obscured by investigative oversights. The evidence had been literally under their noses, misfiled and overlooked for years. The authorities were catching up, but the killer was always one step ahead. On September the 9th, 1983, the carnage took an unexpected turn. In the woods of Galuzzo near Florence, the monster struck again, but this time the victims were not an Italian boy and girl. They were two young men from West Germany, Wilhelm Friedrich Meyer and Jans Urush, both 24. The pair were friends travelling through Italy, and they had parked their Volkswagen camper van in a quiet spot to sleep. Rush had long blonde hair and a slight build. In the darkness, perhaps the monster mistook him for a female companion. The attack unfolded in the same brutal fashion. Both men were shot to death where they sat. Only afterward, one imagines, did the killer realise there was no woman to mutilate. Startled or enraged by the mistake, he left without the ritual excision. In the investigators' eyes, the 1983 double murder raised puzzling questions. Could the monster have thought he was attacking a heterosexual couple? Or was he now killing any pair of vulnerable people on impulse? Police unearthed pornography in the van and initially jumped to the wrong conclusion, that the victims might have been gay lovers. A notion seized on by some newspapers in a burst of sensationalism, but it hardly mattered. What did matter was that the monster had not slowed down at all, despite the massive manhunt underway. Roadblocks, undercover patrols at lovers' lanes, composite sketches of suspicious characters, nothing had caught him yet. The Tuscanist summer of fear rolled on. By 1984, the terror reached its peak. July 29th, in the countryside near Viccio, 21-year-old law student Claudio Stefanisi and his 18-year-old girlfriend, Pia Rontini, were sitting in Claudio's small Fiat Panda, favouring a warm summer night together. Sometime after midnight, their tender moment was shattered. The monster fired through the window, killing Claudio first, then pounced on Pia. Her body was found dragged out onto the grass, her pubic area and left breast cruelly cut away. This was slightly different. Never before had the killer taken a breast. Rumours swirled that Pia's breast and genitals were kept as macabre souvenirs, or perhaps offered in some unholy ritual. Witnesses later recalled that a strange, unpleasant man had been seen watching Pia at the bar where she worked, and following the young couple at an ice cream parlour hours before their murder. It seemed the monster sometimes stalked his targets. Indeed, several female victims, Bettini in 1974, Cambi in 1981, now Rontini in 1984, had expressed fear about some persistent stranger in the days or weeks before they died. Florence's citizens were on a knife's edge. An almost folkloric paranoia took hold. as if any odd fellow on the street could be the dreaded Mostro. That summer, campgrounds and lovers' lanes emptied out. Armed police helicopters buzzed over the hills at night. Young people stayed home under parental watch, and the city's romantic soul felt shackled by terror. Then, in 1985, the monster vanished, but not before one final atrocity that would seal his legend. On the night of September the 7th to 8th, 1985, a pair of tourists from France, Jean-Michel Crevicelli, 25, and Nadine Miriot, 36, were camping in a wooded area near San Casciano, Valdipizia, just outside Florence. They were an unlikely target, not parked in a car, but sleeping in a small tent. Yet the monster seemed to adapt. Under the cover of darkness, he approached the tent and fired through the canvas, hitting Nadine and Jean-Michel. In the chaos, Jean-Michel slashed his way out of the tent and ran for his life into the forest, despite his wounds. The killer chased him down and stabbed him to death a short distance away. With time now to indulge his grotesque impulses, the monster returned to Nadine's body and carried out his by now familiar mutilation, removing the left breast with chilling precision. 2 days later, Florence's chief prosecutor, Silvia Della Monica, received an anonymous envelope in the mail. Inside was a piece of human flesh, a section of Nadine's severed breast, preserved as evidence of the crime, along with a taunting note. The grotesque mailing left no doubt that the monster himself was behind the murders. The monster of Florence had sent a ghastly postcard, challenging the authorities to find the slain couple. Indeed, a mushroom forager had already stumbled upon the gruesome scene in the woods shortly before the letter arrived. The killer's message was clear. He could kill anywhere, anytime, even preying on foreigners without anyone noticing until he chose to announce it. This brazen communication with law enforcement was unprecedented. It signalled a chilling confidence, as if the monster felt untouchable. After September 1985, the killings stopped. 16 people, 8 young couples, had lost their lives in the monster's 17-year reign of terror. The idyllic hills of Florence had been transformed into hunting grounds for a prolific serial murderer. But as horrifying as the murders were, the story was far from over. In many ways, the true nightmare was just beginning. The nightmare of an investigation that would spiral into chaos, false accusations, and even talk of satanic conspiracies. The monster had vanished into the mists of legend, but the hunt for his identity would consume Italy for decades, leaving a trail of broken lives, dark rumours, and unanswered questions.
If this back-to-school season, talking to your teenager sounds like this. With Boost Mobile, make it sound like this. Come to your Boost store, get a line, and take home a tablet for only $99.99. Perfect for staying connected and studying anywhere. They're happy, and you save. Visit your nearest Boost store. Requires ID verification. New $20 per month tablet plan and $35 device setup fee. Taxes extra.
What's it like to care for someone who's sick? To wait for answers, to hope for healing. These are the moments our nation's healthcare teams and their patients face every single day. And it's why we do what we do. We're Siemens Healthineers, and we pioneer breakthroughs in healthcare for everyone, everywhere. Across the country, from rural communities to busy cities, our medical imaging, therapy, and laboratory solutions help providers deliver care that can be smarter, faster, and more precise. With more than 17,000 employees across the United States, we're driving innovations that support healthcare teams, strengthen systems, and truly change people's lives. Because for us, it's about more than technology, more than innovation. It's a promise, built for generations. Siemens Healthineers.
And we'll continue with this story on Thursday. It's a very dark story, very dark indeed. I was trying to choose an episode to work with Season of the Witch that we're having over on the Whispering Woods. And I have heard of this. I think I watched a documentary on Netflix. I think it was probably in Italian. And I can't do my knitting when I'm reading on the telly, so I think I didn't watch it all properly. So it's just really interesting to go through this case. If you'd like to support this podcast, you can do so by visiting patreon.com/The Whispering Woods, where for £2.50 a month you can listen completely ad-free. Or if you are a Whispering Woods listener, for £4.50 a month you can listen to The Whispering Woods and this podcast ad-free. But also on Apple Premium, where for $4.99 a month you can listen to both podcasts ad-free. I want to say a quick thank you to Rog for fact-checking and editing, and as always, stay curious and sleep with the lights on, just in case.
Only Boost Mobile.
Boost Mobile.
We'll give you a free year of service.
Free year?
When you buy a new 5G phone.
New 5G phone?
Enough.
But I'm your hype man. When you purchase an eligible device, you get $25 off every month for 12 months with credits totaling 1 year of free service. Taxes extra for the device and service plan. Online only.
For Mervis Diamond Importers, I'm Ronnie Mervis. Not far from the big mine in Kimberley, South Africa, where the first diamonds were found, lies a small dusty town on the isolated plains. In over 100 years, nothing much has ever happened there, except on Fridays, when the local diamond diggers hold their weekly rough diamond market. Once a week, the prospectors who still work the small independent claims gather to sell off the week's production. Buyers come from long distances because the quality of the stones is so exciting. The bidding for the rough diamonds is fierce. Buyers scream at each other in a frenzy to get the very best diamonds. My brother Kenny attends these sales. He makes sure that he's there early, and Mervis Diamonds gets some fantastic diamonds. Then we bring our diamonds directly to Washington. There are no middlemen. That's why Mervis Diamonds has unbeatable prices and a selection unmatched anywhere. Mervis Diamond Importers. Mervis means more diamonds, much better quality, and the most value. Financing is available. Go to mervisdiamond.com to learn more. For an appointment, call 1-800-HER-LOVE. Nobody pays retail anymore. Why should you?
Ya vienen los touchdowns. ¿Estás listo? Esta temporada de la NFL convierte las jugadas grandes en premios con DraftKings Sportsbook, un socio oficial de apuestas deportivas de la NFL. Descarga la app de DraftKings Sportsbook y usa el código HEART. Ese es el código HEART para recibir $200 en bonus bets al instante cuando hagas tu primera apuesta de $5. En colaboración con DraftKings, la corona es tuya. ¿Problemas con el juego? Llama al 1-800-GAMBLER. En Nueva York, llama al 877-8-HOPE-NY o envía un mensaje de texto con la palabra HOPE-NY al 467-369. En Connecticut, hay ayuda disponible para problemas con el juego. Llama al 888-789-7777 o visita ccpg.org. Juega responsablemente. En nombre de Boot Hill Casino and Resort, Kansas. Debe ser mayor de 21 años. Pueden aplicarse cargos en Illinois. La elegibilidad varía según la jurisdicción. No válido en Ontario. Las apuestas de bonos son de un solo uso. La apuesta no se incluye en las ganancias y caducan después de ser otorgadas. La oferta finaliza el 29 de septiembre 2025 a las 11:59 p.m. hora del este. Los términos en DraftKings.com/sportsbook/promos.